jump right into the word, and I'll try to finish as quickly as possible. Hopefully there will be some time for discussion at the end. So in this next talk, I'd like to talk about how we can put God back at the center of our life and build a rhythm around our relationship with God. The reason I use the word rhythm is because all of life, there's a rhythm. Like a lot of times we think about our relationship with God as things that we do, okay? As things that we must do. As a routine is the word that I oftentimes hear. And I'll be honest, when I hear, and when many of us hear the word routine, we get like this negative connotation to it. But when you think about rhythm it becomes part of who you are. Okay? It's one of those things, and I hear this from people sometimes. They say, I couldn't go to sleep without praying. Why? Not because it was a routine, but because it was part of the rhythm of life. It's something that they do. When they wake up in the morning, for some of us, our rhythm in the morning is that we have a cup of coffee. Okay? For some of us, our rhythm in life, before we go to sleep, is we tuck our kids in bed and we kiss them goodnight. So what I want to talk to you about this afternoon in the second talk, is how do we put God at the center of our lives and build a rhythm around it. And in so doing, what we're also going to talk about, and I think y'all were talking about in this section here, which is the idea of discipleship. And you didn't use that word, that's a word that I'm using to describe something that y'all were talking about, which is, it really starts with that from a place of our own relationships with God. And I think, Ashraf, you were saying this, that out of living out of that relationship with God, we then, so to speak, transmit that relationship to our kids through our own living out of that relationship with God. We invite Him into our families, and we build our families around Him at the very center. The passage we're going to look at in discussing this is Ephesians chapter 6, verses 1 to 4. And this is a passage that we as parents, we love this passage so much. Children, obey your parents in the Lord for this, right? Like, I hear parents, especially as your kids get older and they stop listening to you and they start pushing back. Like, when your kids are younger, most of the time, except for during the terrible, or in my house, the terrorist twos, as we call them, most kids, you tell them to do something and they will usually listen. And when they don't, we quote this passage, Ephesians chapter 6, verse 1. But I think it's very interesting that it's framed also, the second part of it, verse 4 that is, honor your father and mother, which is the first commandment of the promise, that it may be well with you and you may live longer. So that's all part of the children obey. But then there's a commandment to the fathers, and I would say to the parents here, that parents or fathers, it says, do not provoke your children to wrath, but bring them up in the training and admonition of the Lord. Now, this passage is coming right after what? What's in Ephesians 5? Any people who read the scripture or know Ephesians 5? Husbands, love your wives, and wives, submit or in honor or reverence your husband. And so this passage right here is framed within the family dynamic that's built around Christ. And then at the very end of that passage, he says what? St. Paul says what at the end of Ephesians 5? He says, but I speak about Christ and the church. So about this mystery of Christ and the church. And so husbands and wives, our marriage really models to our children the relationship between Jesus Christ and His bride, the church. And so that's why husbands, he's saying, wash the feet of your wife. He doesn't use the word wash feet, but he says, wash your wives with the washing of the word, that you may present them pure and without spot, without blemish. And the image that comes to mind is when Jesus washed the feet of the disciples. And then he turns to the wives and says, wives, submit to your husbands as to the Lord. Reverence them. And so it really models for our kids, who he then turns to, and then he turns back to the parents, what a model, what the relationship with God really looks like. And so the children obey the parents, that's something that we can tell them. But there's another thing that we have to tell ourselves, which is when we disciple our kids, that we should not provoke our children to wrath. And we talked a little bit about it in the first talk when we spoke about how it is that we can transfer a very distorted image of our kids, of God to our kids. That can cause them, that can provoke them to wrath. Okay? That can provoke them to not experience the love of God. He says, but bring them up in training and admonition of the Lord. When he says here, do not provoke your children, I'm just going to list a number of things here. There's about 9 or 10 things here. I'm just going to list them. One thing, how we can provoke our children, is by overprotection. Overprotection. We fence them in, we don't trust them. We don't allow them to develop their own independence. Dr. Yusri, I think it was years ago, he said from the time your children are born, you want to begin to prepare them for their own independence in their house. Because one day they will need, they need to be prepared for that. I met a family recently where the mother, clearly the boy is much older, he graduated from college. It is clear to me that this mother still dresses her son. Okay? It is clear to me. Okay? She speaks for him. She introduces herself and her son. And this is a man we are speaking about. We're not talking about a little 5 or 6-year-old kid who is unable to speak for himself. So overprotection, sometimes we want to do, and I'm saying it comes from a good place. We want to protect our kids, but we also want to encourage our kids to develop their sense of identity. Number 2 is favoritism. Favoritism, comparing our children with each other. Each is unique. I've got my little artist, and I've got my little athlete at home. They're each very different in how they express themselves. This third one, we're trying to figure out how he's going to express himself. We just know right now he's quite destructive at times, and he's really good at it. Okay, it's a gift that he has. And I know as a third child, I was the youngest of 3, and I'm going to be I tell this to my brothers. We all know that I was the favorite child. Okay, they knew, but they were the ones who said it. But it impacted my brother and sister in their relationship with my parents. My mom still denies that I was her favorite, but it's okay. Number 3, overemphasizing achievements. Overemphasizing achievements. If we continually push our children to excel, and it's all about winning all the time. It was very interesting. I listen to ESPN Sports Radio sometimes, and I was listening to one of the talk shows, and this was a Michael Thompson, I believe. He played for the Los Angeles Lakers back in the 80s, Showtime Lakers, and he was talking about how it is that we need to. He said all of our kids are not going to be like. There's one LeBron James in the world. There's one Michael Jordan in the world. Okay, our kids are not newsflash. My kids and your kids are probably not going to make it into the NBA or MLS. It's probably not going to happen. Okay? So he was talking, it was really beautiful. He said we want to stop emphasizing achievement all the time, and also start encouraging the process and the effort that they're exerting. The example he gave, I thought it was really interesting. He said, when we tell our kids, I love the effort that you use in reading, rather than saying you did an amazing job of reading, we're also encouraging the process of development. Okay? Because we all will have kids. One kid is better at reading than another kid. Okay? It's the reality. So that's another one. Overindulgence, giving them everything that they want can provoke them to wrath. Because the day will come when they don't get what they want. And we've met these people who always get what they want when they're little kids, and when they get older, what happens? They think that they can still have whatever they want. And that includes relationships, that includes cars, and houses that includes whatever they want to have, they can have. In church, they're going to have their own way too. Whatever they want to get, they're going to get their way. And they will drive their agenda politically, whether it's in their circle of friends or in a church or whatever. These people will do whatever it takes because they have always gotten their way. Number 5 is discouragement. Telling them all the time they'll never amount to anything. There was 99% growing up. And what did we hear? Why not? I wish it was just why not 100. In my case, it was why not 102. Like, I'm like, I got a 99. And I came back glowing. I'm like, I got a 99. My mom was, there was extra credit. And she goes, why didn't you get 102? I said, because I'm dumb. And I walked away. Right? I mean, when it's constantly discouraging and unable to celebrate the little things, right? We need to be able to celebrate them where they're at. Listen, one of my siblings was not very good at math. Okay? She wasn't, well, my sister wasn't very good at math, right? And just people's brains, the left and the right side, like, we have different strengths. I was much better at the sciences. My sister was much better at the languages, at literature, English, and philosophy, and stuff like that. Okay? So we need to encourage without constantly slamming down. Number 6, and these are all things that we've heard before. Failure to make personal sacrifices. We will never feel bad. We will never look back and say, man, I wish I would have done, I wish I wouldn't have done as much